introduce the next speaker for this event is Miss Laika Marivilla. Now, who is Coach Laika Marivilla? Now, Coach Laika is an RPM, and also a registered psychometrician, an author, a podcast host, and of course, a motivational speaker and an online educator, as well as an educational content creator. No, after getting the top spot in the 2013 civil service exam, Laika started making free content on YouTube to help people pass aptitude exams like the civil service exam and college entrance exams. Now, this birthed a community of learners from all over the world now who call themselves Team Laika. Now, apart from her YouTube channel and other social media account, now which have millions of subscribers combined, Laika teaches review classes and gives educational talks in different parts of the country and various government agencies. Because of her passion for teaching and content creation, Laika was actually selected as one of the YouTube Next Up winners for 2017 and remains active in the creator community here in the Philippines. Now, she was also invited as the only Filipino panelist and moderator for YouTube EduCon held in New Delhi, India in 2018. She was also recently chosen as one of the YouTube and United Nations Development Program UNDP Creators for Change ambassadors for Asia Pacific countries. Now, Laika continues to create educational content about math, English, logic, etc. Her goal is to democratize education here in the Philippines and just maybe the entire world. Now, to introduce our speaker for today, we have Miss Laika Marivilla. Good afternoon, Miss Laika.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you for having me. This is such a huge honor for me to be invited as one of the guest speakers for this event. As someone who has firsthand experience, I always tell my students on both sides of the table, as someone who's trying to hire a talent and someone is trying to get who is trying to get hired, I'm hoping that whatever experiences I've had could be valuable to all of you. So again, thanks for your time today, and let's jump right in because I have just a few minutes with you. All right. Thank you. Now we're going to talk about post-pandemic communication. And if we can flash my slide right here, that would be really helpful. Okay, so one of the things that we have to focus on is that change has become the norm. All right. But there's a bit of silver lining if you look at how things are. Honestly, if you look at history, throughout history, a lot of the pandemics that happened prompted huge developments, especially in our field, especially in the field of human resources, labor, and the industry. If you look at what happened after the Black Death, again, not minimizing the impact that it had on society in general, we see how the severe lack of workers because of what happened during the plague actually triggered a series of changes in the way that people perceive labor. Okay, a lot of people lost their lives, and what happened was it became a workers' economy of some sort. This was the traditional model of serfdom in which workers were indebted to their lords changed because there was a surplus when it comes to positions, but there were fewer workers at that time. And if you look at the model of what's going to happen after this particular pandemic, there are things that we can look at too. Of course, there is the sheer number of people and talents we've lost these past few months, but also there's this changing in the way that people prioritize mental health. And Sir Marvin touched on that earlier too. So there will definitely be changes. And I think the industries, the companies, the professionals that will be impacted, at least in the positive notion, would be the ones who are able to adapt to this change and maximize this opportunity. So again, now we're looking at it as an opportunity, recognizing all the bad things that happened and trying to look at the cards we're dealt with, seeing how we can play this with the most number of, the higher risk or the higher possibility of reward. All right. So again, just saying hi quickly to everyone watching. AJD, JV, Donnelly, Shane, thank you for appreciating the work I do. Kevin De Leon, thank you too. So quick overview, evolution of communication and how the pandemic disrupted the norm. I've been preaching this actually to the top of my lungs at every chance I get, even before the pandemic, that things are changing. With technology, we already knew this. Pre-pandemic, online communication has become an option, but it has remained as an option even with the huge developments in virtual communication, simply because face-to-face communication has always been preferred, right? There are people, di ba, there's this running joke, even if you scroll through social media, there are people who would call for meetings, even if it's necessary. This could have been an email, right? All of these lines that you probably are familiar with, either hearing it from others or even you saying this in the moments of your honesty, we all know this. Face-to-face communication is still much preferred. But what happened with the pandemic is that face-to-face communication was lessened, if not totally eliminated. We just basically didn't have a choice. And what happened with that is it accelerated the need for online communication. So, what was like the icing on top of your cake before the pandemic? If you could draft a good email, if you could communicate well over the phone, that was just a bit of a bonus, right? But now it's become necessary. So, when we're trying to project or trying to predict what's going to happen after the pandemic, we have to put all of these things into consideration. Now, with online communication now being part of everyone's tool belt, right? Even sabihin natin, day workers or laborers, you would see that the people thriving right now are the ones who were able to utilize online tools. They were able to promote themselves on social media. They even have their own YouTube channels, their own social media accounts. These are the people that we want to be part of our team. We want to be part of our companies to further our reach after the pandemic and again maximize the growth potential. But the problem is there's this catch, right? Now we are left with something different. Face to face communication is primed to evolve. It's definitely not going to be the same. You know how people used to say, how we had normal before the pandemic. Now, what we have right now in the middle of the pandemic is the new normal. And people are still thinking, okay, after the pandemic, we're going to revert to the old normal. But actually, I tend to disagree. I tell people it's like this. You have the new normal, which is what we're having right now, with a conference of so many people that I'm unable to see face to face. But after this, even after the pandemic, after all things go back to the way it used to be, it's not going to be like what was normal before. It's going to be a newer normal. So again, the need for face-to-face communication and our soft skills is going to be different. Because now what was a bonus has become a necessity, and what was a necessity now transforms into the game changer. How good are you when it comes to face-to-face communication, and how much better are you than the other people who are doing great when it comes to online communication? Okay. Now, just drawing from a TED talk made by Dr. Julie Ansis, who is a cyber psychology expert. She said that these are some of her predictions. Okay, I'm going to borrow from her. She said remote work and hybrid work will stay. 30% of people surveyed said they would rather stay and work at home. Now, efficiency now switches from being a luxury into a priority. We like talking about that, right? In our boardrooms, in our meetings, in our training programs. Oh, efficiency is important. Yeah. But with what happened these past few years and with people enjoying the extra time that they had at home, now they're trying to think of a company that will maximize my efficiency so I have at least most of the spare time that I had during the pandemic. Now, awkwardness during the first few months or even first few years is to be expected. Remember how that we will have graduated two new batches of professionals, of graduates who are basically self-taught, who went through online learning. And because of that, their interactions with mentors, with team leaders will be vastly different than the fresh blood that we used to deal with before the pandemic, which means also that boundary management is necessary. We have to look at it as this. Of course, we can always train new personnel to reach the level of excellence or the level of productivity that we want for a company. But if you truly want to grab a hold of all of these professionals who will be available after the pandemic, we have to really rethink the way we prioritize things in our office. And I didn't include that in the presentation, but Dr. Julie Ansis even said that leaders who prefer face-to-face interaction and meetings that don't really seem to be necessary need to rethink their way of leadership, because post-pandemic employees will not handle it as well as pre-pandemic employees did. Okay, so again, we need to tweak the way that we lead people. So it all goes down. It all boils down to effective and efficient communication. Now, I'm not going to stand here and preach that I'm the best at this. We're all still learning about it. And again, we are at the cusp of a new revolution when it comes to communication. But we can revisit some of the things that we even covered in our years of education, right? When it comes to effective and efficient communication, I'm going to propose two things, okay? And it has to be both, no? That we could go around with just one and or the other, but now it's even more important that we have both. Now, empathic communication and emphatic communication. A lot of people kind of have a hard time seeing the difference between those two words. But what you have to understand is that empathic communication is about empathy. It's about feeling. It's more feeling focused. Okay, it acknowledges the feeling of the speaker, of the listener, of society. So it's about that, being empathetic, having empathy for other people. And again, being in the middle of a crisis and having survived the crisis, we have years to go before our workforce is, at top productivity, I would surmise, because of all the burdens and the hurts that they've had to go through. These are going to be survivors of huge trauma, huge loss that we have to deal with and encourage to be at the top of their game. So again, empathy is very important. We have to know how to acknowledge their feelings. Now, on the flip side, emphatic communication is about emphasis. We have to understand that when it comes to communicating, even as we acknowledge feelings, we have to be as focused as possible. There has to be a healthy balance there. What that means is that communication has to be edited and re-edited again and again. We have to master the art of talking about what is necessary. We're going to dive deeper into that later. Now, another thing that we have to look at would be empathic communication is person-centered. Okay, and not self-centered, ha. It's person-centered. Ibig sabihin, we have to look at each individual as their own person. Each person is different. Each person has their own proclivities, their own interests, their own ways of communicating. And before, let's just be very very honest. We always look at the interaction between hiring managers, the HR leaders, and employees as this. Okay, you are kind of indebted to us. We are the bosses. We are the people who sign your paycheck. So you should be the one making adjustments. But again, if you want to make use of the opportunities that are going to be presented to us after the pandemic, you have to understand that the question, sino ang mag-adjust or who will have to make adjustments, now shifts into us. Okay, we also have to acknowledge that these are people. And in order for us to encourage them to be as productive as possible, to grow as much as possible within the company and stay, have that kind of loyalty that will have them with us until retirement, the key to that is being person-centered. What are their needs? Are we sensitive to their needs? No, and it's not just sensitivity. It's about communicating how sensitive we are to their needs. So again, there has to be a need for empathic communication. Now, let's talk about traditional communication now. Okay, if you're talking about person-centered communication, what does that mean? Now, this is the usual plan when it comes to communicating to people, right? We have a message. What do I want to say? Okay, this is what I want to say. Type it up, right? Then you have your media. How should I say this? Should I use an email? Should I call them? Should I have a video presentation? Should I gather everyone in a town hall, right? There's this media. How do we say it? And then we ship it over to the masses. And what do they remember? We don't really know. Sometimes we have evaluation forums. Sometimes we have feedback loops. Sometimes we have ways to talk to them. But actually, after that, we kind of toss our hands up in the air and say, "Oh, I've done my part. I've communicated what I wanted to, and then that's it." But more and more, we're understanding that this isn't enough. And the with the with the need for online communication and shorter emails and shorter calls and Zoom meetings and online meetings only when necessary, we've understood that again the shift has to change. Now, this is a pattern that I try to teach educators as well. Okay, I call it the loop back. Okay, when it comes to communication, so it's no longer a one-way street. We have to rethink the way that we present things. So we're going to add two extra steps in order to switch traditional communication to empathetic or empathic communication. We have to add an extra two steps. So going from what do I want to say, how should I say it, and what do they remember, we have to go back to the media and ask ourselves, okay, using this media, how can they remember it better? Is it using bullet points for my emails? Is it having verbal cues like, this is the first step, this is the next thing you're going to do, as prompts for your phone calls? Is this using a presentation, even if it's deemed unnecessary for my video conferences, just so my people have a visual version of what I'm talking about? Okay, so consideration has to happen. How can they remember it better? And then, of course, we have to loop it right back to the message. So there's going to be a lot of editing that's happening. No, what do they need to remember? Because at the end of the day, even if I maximize the way that I present the information, if it's too much, if I'm adding some of the information that they don't really necessarily need to remember, then I am wasting their time. They would probably scroll through it. They would probably focus on information that's not as important as the rest. So again, it takes a lot of humility, right? A lot of I would have to say heart-rending decisions when it comes to communication, because now it's again person first. It's the person we're trying to reach first. The message would be different from the first draft to the last. It's going to be vastly different. Sometimes you would sit there and wonder, am I oversimplifying this? This is not me. This is not the way that I speak. But again, it's going to be necessary because this is what people respond well to. Okay. And actually, even in my job as an educational content creator and what I do on a daily basis, this is the same thought process that I have to go through. I could give you a list of things to remember, but I need to think about how you can remember it better by forming mnemonic devices. And of course, go back to what you actually need to remember so I can trim the fat. Okay. Now, looking at emphatic communication now, what is purpose-driven communication? Okay, because empathic communication is person-centered. It's the person first. But emphatic communication forces us to think about the purpose of the material. Why do I need to communicate things? And how do we look at that now? Okay, just 3 tips. Number 1, ABCs naman siya. You have your accuracy. So include everything that is necessary. This is not the time for, long greetings and 3-paragraph storytelling sessions. This is all about accuracy. It's one of the most common or most relatable experiences during the pandemic is how people would sometimes message you with a hi, right, or a good morning, or kumusta ka, how are you, without any other information, and it usually causes anxiety, right? I'm not sure if you agree, but you can always respond to the chat. I can see it right now. But right, whenever someone messages you with a hi or a good morning or how are you, sometimes you tend to worry because there is a huge range of possibilities when it comes to their ask. What are they going to ask of me? Are they going to follow up on deadline? Are they going to tell me to do something else, right? So again, emphatic communication with your leadership skills and with your strength of communication has to be as accurate as possible. I have to include everything that is necessary in this one email, in this one form of communication, just to make sure it saves them time, saves me time, and saves me the worry. Saves them the worry too. Okay. Second factor is B, brevity. And what that means is it's not enough to include everything that is necessary. You have to include everything and only what is necessary. Okay. I'm not saying that we have to come off as robots after this. But what that means is if it's necessary for me to share my own story, to share a quick motivational quote or a quip here, something that's more personal, if it is necessary, then it can stay, right? But include only what is necessary. Okay. Now, the third point when it comes to emphatic communication is clarity. So that means it's not enough to include everything and only what is necessary. Again, it goes back to empathic communication, which is person centered. You have to include everything and only what is necessary to be understood. Because at the end of the day, it's all about clarity. Now, how do we do that then? So this is just a quick little exercise that you can maybe practice wherever you may be. Just go through your emails, go through your communications, look at your messages. Am I being accurate? Am I being short, but with this messaging, am I being clear? Okay. So am I using numbered points, bullet points? Am I really emphasizing the need for this situation, or am I leading someone along on a long storytelling session that is completely unnecessary? So again, accuracy, brevity, and clarity. So Why do we need to do it? Because empathic communication increases effectivity. If the person knows that they're talking to another person, again, this is one of the limitations of AI that we've seen even in cyber psychology, right? Then that means if you come off as human, acknowledging their feelings, talking to them as a human, that to the point that they can hear your voice every time you type something up, then that means you're doing a great job. And now, emphatic communication improves efficiency because it goes straight to the point. It achieves a goal, so it's purpose driven. Now, if you have both, I think you're going to be good to go. Now, a few more tips for better communication because I have only a few minutes with you. Here are a few of my personal tips when it comes to day to day communication. Number one, think about word colors. Now, a lot of people call it by different names, sometimes accuracy of language. One of my favorite books is The Giver by Lois Lowry. And during one of the scenes in that book, the child, the protagonist's sister was trying to kind of hurry their mother when it comes to cooking. And then she said, "Mother, I'm starving," right? Or "I'm famished, I'm starving." And the mother, because in their society it's built that way, the mother said, "Accuracy of language, please." What that means is you cannot possibly be starving because you ate earlier today. Starving means someone who hasn't eaten in a long time. So you're not starving, you're just hungry. And when we think about communication, word colors and word texture, accuracy of language plays a really important role. So I encourage you, all of you, no matter where you are or who you are, to expand your vocabulary. So read more, look at words, look at synonyms, right? Because not every synonym works the same way. You can't just say, "Oh, you're good," right? But what does good mean? Were they fast? Were they accurate? Were they clear? Were they up to par with the standards of the company? Did they meet a deadline? So that makes them good. You have to be as specific as possible. So again, think about communication and word colors. What is the best word for this situation? Okay? Because you know how people would sometimes try to sugarcoat things or say the safe word sometimes. But when it comes to communication, especially after the pandemic, you have to understand that these people want to go about their day, right? And they want to journey with people who care about their feelings. And if you can't hit the feeling correctly, you would have a hard time connecting with them. Let me give you an example. A lot of people use the word angry, right? If you talk to a maybe irate team member or even your boss, if they're mad, you could say, "Boss, why are you so angry?" Right? And angry may not be the perfect word for that because angry sometimes just connotes the negative and emotion of being mad, right? Sometimes it even has the feeling or the texture of being out of control. So maybe you could reframe that. "Boss, are you feeling disappointed?" Right? Disappointed means I'm expecting something and it didn't happen. You could say, "Are you frustrated? I can sense that you're frustrated right now." Now, frustrated is different from disappointed because disappointed can be a one-time thing. This is the first time that someone didn't meet the deadline. But frustrated means someone keeps missing the deadline again and again. They've been trying their best to express their concern, but that hasn't been recognized or things haven't changed at all. So again, even the difference between disappointed, frustrated, mad, right? Or angry, those things are vastly different. But if you look at the dictionary, they're all synonymous, right? So again, look at those words, look at the texture of words, the color of words. How do I explain this in a better way? So that you're not fixated with the same five words that we keep using. Are you good? Are you bad? Are you angry? Did you do well? Right? Everyone says good job. Like, how do you reframe this to communicate better and to be more empathetic, empathic, and emphatic? All right. Now, next tip is to use complete sentences. Right? There's this trend going around on social media. I know some of you are on TikTok because I can see in your comments, right? People trying to reword noted because noted has been this parang jargon lingo na within the confines of the professional field. If you say noted, okay, someone sends an email, you reply with a noted, right? But it may come off as a joke, but it's true. You have to use complete sentence as much as possible because people tend to forget when they're using language. They tend to forget things that they don't use. So you have to practice using complete sentences. Make sure that you have at least the subject, the verb, and the receiver of the action there. Okay, try to be as clear as possible. Now that may seem like nitpicking, right? Oh, you have to be clear, but it's okay as long as it's understood. But at the end of the day, how well did they understand what you're trying to communicate? And it really boils down to how well you explained yourself. Did you use complete sentences? Were you sure that you put in the right tenses? Diba? Because that would change the time frame and the way that we communicate to other people. Now, another tip, this is by observation too, being in communication with a lot of different people, even professionals, right? You have to pair your pronouns. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of people like using pronouns. Blame it on our Filipino need to be as vague as possible. You know how our culture being direct and being upfront is kind of frowned upon, right? We like to use words like ano, kwan, siya. It's very vague. But when it comes to your professional communication, make sure that you pair your pronouns well. Do not lead with a pronoun, okay? Because if you do, it's going to be as vague as it possibly could be. So don't start off an email with she said this, because who is that she? You have to always lead with a name. Okay. Now it may come off as too robotic or too formal if you keep using the name. So you could of course use pronouns, but make sure that it's paired right with the person that you're pertaining to. So especially if you're talking about a sequence of events. Okay. Make sure that you go back to who that person is after you've inserted another person in the conversation. Okay. Now, the next tip is this: you have to choose whether to use the passive voice or the active voice. Now, a lot of people, this falls through the cracks, right? Well, it's just a sentence. But the way that we choose whether we're going to use the passive voice or the active voice actually affects the feeling of a sentence. There's a difference between the problem has been addressed and I have addressed the problem, right? Putting yourself in the position, like using pronouns like I, we, this is what I did for you, okay? Switching to the active voice makes the person feel cared for, right? Makes them feel like you actually did something for them. Now, of course, you could still say the problem has been addressed, and they could maybe, and after a few steps, think, okay, this person is great. They did it for me. But it's better if you lead with that. Okay, let me take care of that problem for you. You know how there's a running joke, especially in the earlier years of the BPO industry, of how these are people who are just focused on customer service. But again, right now with the switch and with what happened with the pandemic, we all understand now the need for positive phrasing, the need for using the right words, the need for having empathic communication, right? Because that is how we present ourselves better than the rest. Okay. So again, try to change the way that you rephrase things. Now, how to use the passive voice naman? Well, I think using the passive voice is great when it comes to dealing with negative situations, right? If you do not really see the need to apologize because it really wasn't your fault, or if the problem isn't caused by your company, using the passive voice could be the safe bet. So again, there's strength in each of the voices. You have to be smart when it comes to choosing which voice to use. Now, I wish I had more time to dive deeper into this with you, but for now, those are some of the tips that I'm going to leave you with. Again, think about word colors, word accuracy, use complete sentence, pair your pronouns, and choose between passive and active voice, and make it deliberate. Okay, the keyword here is deliberate communication. How do I want to present myself? What do I really truly want them to remember? Okay, again, it's not about what you want to say, it's about how can I be better understood. Okay, so just a few things to wrap it up. I'm encouraging you to read and listen and consume content to understand. So the primary goal here isn't to, just put my piece out there or see things the way that I want things to be seen. It's more about understanding. Okay, so again, read and listen to understand, because we also have to acknowledge the fact that not everyone has the same set of soft skills, of communication skills, but we have to have the patience when it comes to dealing with those people. And of course, the next step would be to write and speak to be understood. So again, no, we're not writing and speaking to be heard, because there's a huge difference between being heard and being understood. And if you truly want to create an impact, if you truly want to model and exemplify the kind of workplace or the kind of industry, the kind of society that we want to be part of, it's more about our considerations for other people. Again, be both empathic and emphatic. Practice empathy and emphasize the right things, and you should be good to go. So write and speak to be understood. All right. So that's it for my presentation today. I know we have just such a short time with you, but I'm hoping that you can at least pick up a thing or two from that. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity. And yeah, thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, no, Coach Laika Maravilla, for that talk. No, actually, we are really on the verge of a brand new era, not just in the
Mhm.
business, but even in the education system. No, so
Mhm.
some team members are heading back into the office, while others opt to remain virtual. But of course, no matter where these employees and even these students work or study, there's still a high probability that they are really exhausted and frazzled. Thus, no, they become so
Mhm.
irritated. So that is why it's
Mhm.
really good, no, to have this kind of session, empathic and empathic. No, those two words are very important because previously, no, we used to dwell more into assertive communication, but I
Yeah.
think it's not really suitable as of the moment because people are really exhausted and frazzled. Now,
Mhm.
as well as the challenge in the communication as well is that the challenge there is we just talk and then we just listen,
Mhm.
but we do not even give an opportunity to have the employees or students to ask questions, which is actually
Mhm.
one of the most important element for us to have a successful question. Now, before we go through the questions from the audience, so I would like to ask Coach Laika, no, how would you like or how would you describe a good or effective communication in the new normal?
Okay, I would describe it as this: when both parties leave knowing that they were heard and they were understood, I think that's successful communication. Now, one may think this way: yeah, but I'm the one who needs to say something, right? The listener doesn't need to play a role in this. They just need to understand what I'm saying. Yes, but they have to at least feel that they were heard, even if they were just listening. And how do I do that? That means putting them into consideration in the way that I frame my message. If this is the vocabulary that they are comfortable with, if I'm speaking to a group of engineers that are very technical in their jobs, I would be saying this in a different way versus if I'm talking to a group of interns or if I'm talking to a group of executives, right? So it's always, again, person centered. If I'm able to rephrase this in a way that it's going to be understood well, even if I didn't give them a chance to speak, they would still feel heard. So that's kind of my goal when it comes to communication. If both parties come off of that feeling, hey, I like that session, I learned something, I picked up something from that, I think they're listening to me, that's successful communication. And a good sign of that when it comes to the metrics will be this: if I call another meeting, would they still be there? If the numbers are constantly dwindling, that means we have to change the way that we phrase things.
Right, thank you for that. No, we also have a question here from Jen Garucho. Hi, Laika, I'm a fan. Quick question: what tips can you give on properly delivering your thoughts, but you don't want to sound too much or sound probably condescending?
Mm. Again, no, person first. So you have to look at the demographic, where the people I'm talking with, what's the kind of vocabulary they're more familiar or more comfortable with. That's always going to be at the top of your head when framing your messages. But one of the more practical things or tips I could give you would always stick to a 3 point outline. Okay, so what does that mean? You can't, if you're speaking, you just stick to 3 quick points. Just and it's always like this: point, and then maybe an example. So point, example, point, example, point, example, and you should be good to go. If you feel at any point that I'm trying to over explain this point, you could just move along, and then again leave room for questions after, because that's the point. It's going to be communication. It's better for you to leave room for them to ask questions than for you to keep rambling on and on. So I'll stop right there.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. No. So, is there also a way to measure or assess no effective communication, Coach Laika?
Again, the feedback loop has to be there all the time. A lot of people avoid asking the question: did I express myself clearly? Was I clear enough? A lot of people ask, but they don't really wait for a response, right? So my encouragement for you would be, instead of like having just a feedback form, which again has been overused, like the QR code, sign up for this to get your certificate, you could really have maybe more focused groups, individuals, even way after the event. Okay, so we had this meeting on a Monday, maybe go back to them on a Wednesday, ask them again, what are the things that you remembered from the previous session, from what are the talking points that were really embedded in your brains, right? And go from there. Because if you go back after a few days and they still remember it, that's actually a good gauge if you communicated well. So again, be a little bit more creative. Think about longevity when it comes to the information that we're trying to download. It's really not just a one-time session.
All right. So now, as we make way to the new normal, no, there's actually a lot of challenges and adjustments that
Mm.
uh, is being available, or being happening, no, in the new normal. Now, would like to know, what do you believe are the greatest challenges, for a good communication in the new normal?
Um, we live in a world where information is literally at our fingertips, right? You know how when we were younger, I would say we, assuming that most of you are millennials or at least came before us. So these are the 90s generation. We were met with dial-up networks and slow internet, and up until now, there's just a huge jump into accessibility. Even what I do right now, which is trying to democratize access to education, this is something that's impossible maybe 5 or even 10 years ago. So again, there's a lot of access to information. Now, what I am predicting, fearless predictions now, what I'm predicting is this. If everyone else is giving them a lot of information, the kind of information that would make a difference would be the ones that are more personal, that are more emotional, that are more relatable. And we are seeing this more and more, actually, even the way that people consume content. I wish I had more time about this, but looking at the algorithm, right? If you give out maybe a list of 20 effective tips, even if you have the best studies to back those up, even if you have great examples and case studies, if those aren't personal to the people, they would click out. And I guess that's the same way when it comes to the way that we communicate to other people. How can I be clear and still feel human to them? Because that's the one thing that I think AI cannot replace. If this person, leans in when they listen, even if it's on a virtual meeting, if they look at the camera lens versus the screen when they're presenting something. These are little things that we have to look at when it comes to communication. And so again, go person centered. You will never go wrong.
All right. So I guess now we're seeing multiple questions here as to how they can learn more about the things like this. And do you offer speaking coaching programs, etc., etc.? So perhaps this is the best time for you to plug your services and invite everyone to watch and subscribe to your channels and various social media sites.
All right. Thank you again for this opportunity. And Jester, thank you so much for moderating this really well. You can reach me through my social media accounts. You can find my personal accounts. It's at Laika Maravilla. So LYQA. Just remember the spelling, LYQA Maravilla. And you could reach me there. You can also email me at coach@teamlaika.com for inquiries.
Okay, so with that, we'd like to thank again Coach Laika Maravilla for this event. Now, to introduce again one of our brand partners for this event,